Hello, I just wanted to demonstrate the usage of the wheelchair assessment app. This app was made during my Applied 5 and it was used as my Applied 5 project. I discussed wheelchair assessments with my CI, used references that I found from online databases and journals, and went from there. The app was created with Java. It is an Android only app currently, but I'm looking to expand on that soon. App is right over here. I initially wanted to use a screen recorder, but I'm actually just recording from my phone onto a tablet, so it might be a little blurry. I'm sorry about that. I just couldn't get the screen recorder working. Uh, for some background, the wheelchair assessment app is the main goal of it is to make it as simple as possible to perform wheelchair assessments. This is typically for DPT students or new grads or any veteran PTs who don't necessarily have any experience with wheelchairs. Depending on the setting you work in, you might have less or more experience than others. There are three different sections to it. There's the assessment section, which we'll go over first. The dimension section, which just right now just only gives you a small picture of uh, what measurements should be taken for a wheelchair. A lot of times vendors like to do their own measurements, which is fine, but it's good for a therapist to know the measurements and how to assess them accordingly. Finally, there is the additional component section, which just gives justifications and recommendations based on uh, typical wheelchair assessments. For the first section, the assessment section, basically the app asks yes or no questions in order to make sure that it's as simple as possible for a DPT student or a new graduate to perform these assessments. And after you answer these yes or no questions with a simple checkbox, just like that, uh, at the end of the survey, you'll get results and a justification to be used in your documentation. Obviously, this does not replace clinical reasoning, clinical judgment, or anything like that. It is just used to assist in making a recommendation, and then the PT and the vendor should go from there to kind of discuss uh, any other components or any changes afterwards. So, for example, for the first question, does a patient have a mobility deficit that significantly impairs their ability to safely and timely perform, uh, participate and perform in MRADLs? We'll say yes for that one. Uh, does the patient have a mobility deficit that's too significant to be resolved with an assistive device? We'll say yes there. We'll say the patient is not able to propel a manual wheelchair. The next two questions are going to be related to manual wheelchairs as well, specifically ultralight wheelchairs. So it does differentiate between different manual wheelchairs. But since our patient is unable to propel, we don't have to. We won't be marking those. Is the patient's mobility limitations due to a neurological condition? Let's say yes. Obviously, we don't have a patient right now. Just kind of doing this as a demonstration. We could say the patient has CP or any other neurological condition. The patient have an inability to maintain upright head posture due to hypotonic weak neck musculature. Let's say no for now, but let's say the patient does have a postural deformity that decreases their ability to maintain midline, an erect midline position. Let's say they do perform lateral transfers. Let's say they are dependent with pressure relief. They do not perform self-catheterization. They do have spasticity. And just for this example, let's say they do have lower extremity edema. And obviously there, it took maybe a minute for me to complete that survey. I will hit the results button. And what this gives you is the recommendations for what they might need, depending on how you answered those questions. and then it'll give you the justification as to why they need each one of those specific things. And what I eventually want to do is be able to make this, as you can see, there's no personal health information in this. So what I'm thinking is to add an additional thing that allows you to email this to yourself or something like that, just to make it easier for a PT to put this in their documentation if they wanted to, or even send it to a provider. As providers sometimes struggle with justifying or helping to justify DME or any type of equipment. So basically just gives you that, and then you are good to go. Obviously, you have a conversation with the vendor, use your clinical reasoning. This does not replace it, and then you can always just reset it if you do make an error. As far as the dimension section, this right now, it just gives you an image of what you would typically need to measure. There were there were measurements at the bottom that kind of described what A was, what B was, what C was. I'm not sure. I kind of ran into some technical issues there, and they will be added soon. And I actually want to add a text box for each one, so you can actually list them, just to make it as easy as possible for the therapist. And then there's the additional component section, which basically allows you to choose additional components and then give you a small justification as to why they would need those justifications. These are all justifications that have been used on my own documentation and have been accepted by Medicare and Medicaid. They were a part of MetroHealth's justification process. They have their own smart phrases for justifications, and I kind of used those, and I had permission to use those to create this, to use that during this the making of this app. And that is about it. Again, it would be nice to be able to add that to documentation, which is the next step for me with developing this this app. I do want to continue working on it. I've been told by a few people, a few of the staff members at Metro, that is something to continue working on, and they would love to try it out and use it on the therapist that will be taking over half of the wheelchair clinics after I leave. So it'll be interesting to see how they do with it, how they like it, what could be changed, and kind of just keep building on it. That's the plan. But thanks for watching this. This was my presentation on my wheelchair assessment app. It's a lot of fun to make, and I'm looking forward to keep working on it. Thanks.